One of the greatest war films ever made was The Great Escape, with the iconic image of Steve McQueen performing the famous jump on the motorcycle. However, the events of the film are loosely based upon a true story, an incredible plan to escape from Stalag Luft III. The prisoner of war camp was run by the Luftwaffe, and it held members of the Western Allied air forces who had been captured. It was close to the town of Sagan in Germany, and became the scene of two incredibly daring escape attempts. The second was labelled The Great Escape, and following the incredible escape attempt, there were bloody reprisals and executions ordered by Hitler upon the men who dared to escape the camp. This resulted in the cold-blooded murder of 50 prisoners from many different countries. Join us today as we look at the brutal executions of The Great Escape from Stalag Luft III, and remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Inside of the German armed forces, each branch of the military were responsible for looking after prisoners of war from the same branch of foreign forces. For example, RAF prisoners were the responsibility of the Luftwaffe. Stalag Luft III opened on the 21st of March 1942, and the first prisoners there were British and Commonwealth officers who arrived in the following month. Many different compounds at the camp opened as more airmen were captured, and they were opened for different nations' soldiers. The prison itself had a number of different elements that made trying to escape rather tricky. The barrack in which the prisoners were housed inside of were around 60 centimetres raised off the ground. This meant that guards could easily see if tunnelling from a barrack was going on. Also, the camp was built on sandy foundations, which meant if the sand deposit from a tunnel was dumped somewhere, it could easily have been seen. Also, allegedly, microphones had been placed around the camp to detect any digging under the surface. Within Stalag Luft III, the conditions were rather adequate. There was a large library and school inside where prisoners could learn different skills and even obtain degrees. Some learned languages and even law, and the courses were provided by the Red Cross. There was also a theatre built where performances happened, and also radio was allowed inside. All inmates were vetted by the Germans and were interrogated heavily. The Germans did not want anyone who wasn't a legitimate airman inside of the camp. The guards became known as goons, and the movement of guards was tracked closely by officers, and the 800 guards based there were either too old for service or had been injured on duty, or were convalescing or wounded. The prisoners were offered better treatment than those in other prisoner of war camps, but food was a slight issue. The rations were reduced, but they ate better than any other prisoner of war, and much was supplied by the Red Cross. There were many sports fields at the camp too, with prisoners playing basketball, football, table tennis and other sports. Most of the men inside of the camp, despite their treatment, wanted to get their freedom and to return home, and some wanted to get out to continue the fight against the Germans. A first escape attempt occurred in October 1943, where prisoners made a modern-day Trojan horse. They made a gymnastics vaulting horse, and it was used to hide men, tools and soil containers. Each day the horse was taken to a spot near to the fence whilst exercise happened, and a tunnel was then dug. At the end of the day, a sheet of wood was placed over the tunnel and then covered with soil. For 3 months 3 prisoners took shifts to dig, and they dug over 30 metres of tunnel using bowls and rods to create air holes. Under the cover of darkness, on the 19th of October 1943, 3 men made their escape. 2 reached a port and were stowed in a Danish ship and made it back to Britain, but another managed to get the train to Danzig and go via a ship to Stockholm before heading back to Britain. Before this attempt, escape plans were being drawn up often inside of Stalag Luft III. In March 1943, RAF squadron leader Roger Bushell had created a plan to lead a mass escape from the North Compound, which would take place a year later. He was imprisoned with many other British airmen, and he called a committee to talk about the plan. He said, "Everyone here in this room is living on borrowed time. By rights we should all be dead. The only reason that God allowed us this extra ration of life is so we can make life hell for the Hun. In the North Compound we are concentrating our efforts on completing and escaping through one master tunnel. No private enterprise tunnels allowed. 3 bloody deep, bloody long tunnels will be dug, Tom, Dick and Harry. One will succeed." The escape attempt was authorised, and it was seen as it stood a good chance of working. The use of 3 tunnels meant that if one was discovered, it would not scupper the whole plan. Bushell planned to get over 200 men out, all in civilian clothing, and many with forged papers. The attempt would be huge in its size, and because of this it became known as the Great Escape and codenamed Big X. Over 600 prisoners were involved in the digging of the tunnels. The 3 tunnels were dug in complete secrecy. Everyone had to refer to them by their codenames Tom, Dick and Harry, and anyone who used the word tunnel was threatened with court-martial by Bushell and being left inside. The tunnels were dug deep, around 9 metres below the surface, and they were rather small. The sandy walls were stabilised by wood from the camp, and much of this came from the beds of prisoners. Other materials were used, and the prisoners even built devices to help, including a pump to push fresh air along the tunnel. Sand was dumped in various places around, being carried in towels and even underpants. 25,000 trips to dump the sediment was made throughout the camp, but the Germans knew that something was going on. Many of the suspects who they believed were responsible for the planning of an escape attempt were transferred to other camps, but only 6 had been involved in the construction of the tunnels. It became too risky to dump sand too, and they began to fill up one of the tunnels, codenamed Dick, with sand and also using it for storage. Some inmates even managed to bribe guards for information regarding transport and maps. Eventually the entrance to Tom Tunnel was discovered, as guards had seen sand being removed from the hut where it was being worked on, and this was then closed and dynamited. However, Harry was completed. By March 1944 it was ready, and it was ordered that escape should go ahead as soon as the tunnel was ready. With this plan, only 200 who worked on the tunnels would be allowed to escape. The prisoners were separated into 2 groups. The first was for serial offenders, who were guaranteed a place. This was made up of 100 soldiers. 30 of these were those who spoke German well, and had tried to escape before. Also those who worked hardest on the tunnel were included. The second group was chosen by drawing lots, and it was considered they had less chance of success. The escapees waited for a moonless night, and after a week of tense waiting, they went for it on the 25th of March. As night fell, those who were given a chance went to Hut 104. However, the exit door of Harry Tunnel was frozen, and this delayed the escape. It was also realised that the tunnel then came short of the forest and only just past the barbed wire fence. The first man came out at about 10:30 p.m, just short of the tree line, much closer to the guard tower than it was believed. The escaping prisoners were then reduced to 10 an hour, rather than 1 a minute. An air raid even caused the camp's electric lighting to be turned off, slowing down the escape, and the tunnel even partly collapsed at around 1 a.m. 76 of the men managed to escape to freedom during this. However, at 4:55 a.m, the 77th man was spotted by guards. Those in the tree line began to run. The guards struggled to find the tunnel entrance initially, giving valuable time to the disposal of evidence and fake papers. Hut 104 was one of the last to be searched, and even guard dogs couldn't find the tunnel, but a German guard who crawled the other way then revealed its location. Many of the escapees could not get to a nearby railway station, and because of this they missed their trains at night. Many then decided to walk across the country, or to wait on the platform in the day. The intense cold also forced many of the escapees to stay on the roads and out of the forests, making them easier to locate. After the escape, a full inventory of the camp was ordered, which showed how huge the Great Escape really was. Over 4,000 boards from beds had gone missing, 300 metres of electric cable, 635 mattresses, 52 tables and much more. Much of the electric cable stolen had been left unattended by Germans working nearby, and because it wasn't reported, they were shot by the Gestapo, being accused of being accomplices. It took time, but eventually 73 of the 76 who escaped were captured. News had even reached Hitler of the attempt, and he was furious, and he wanted every officer who was captured to be shot dead. However, it was made aware that ordering reprisals as bloody as this could cause a massacre of German pilots who had fallen into Allied hands. It was agreed that more than half were to be shot, and Himmler was ordered to carry out the shootings. He fixed the number at 50 to be executed. The remains of those executed were then to be cremated and their ashes brought back to Stalag Luft III to act as a deterrent. Himmler organised the logistics for the executions and then passed it to the Gestapo. The orders said that recaptured officers would be passed to the criminal police, and then 50 would be passed over to the Gestapo to be killed. The specific 50 were chosen in a number of different ways by Arthur Niebuhr. Those from Eastern Europe were selected, and the leadership of the escape was also chosen. Those who had famous surnames, for example Churchill, were omitted, as it's believed they did not want to execute anyone who had a link to a famous Briton, and subsequently reprisals could be ordered. 5 days after the breakout, 35 escapees were stuck behind bars in cramped cells at a jail at Görlitz, south of Sagan. As the prisoners were recaptured, they were then interrogated by the Gestapo for information. The executions carried a very familiar pattern and were performed in this way. The men were brought in for interrogation, and after this they were then taken out of the prison in a car. They were taken in either pairs or on their own, following the interrogation. The escapees believed they were being repatriated back to the camp, as executing them would be a war crime, as technically they were prisoners of war, who were under the care of those at Stalag Luft III. But this did not happen, and 50 would never make their way back into the camp. They were taken in the cars down a country road, and then the Gestapo agents would ask them if they needed to go to the toilet, and the men would be taken out of the car. As they were preparing to go to the toilet, the men were then approached from behind by their executioner. The Gestapo agents would then pull out their pistol and shoot them dead in cold blood. Sometimes they were mowed down by machine gun fire too. So at the side of country roads, they were executed in pairs or singularly. The movie The Great Escape portrays this as a huge massacre, in which the escapees are brought together and then shot dead, but this wasn't the case. After the shootings, the bodies of the men were then left and later retrieved, and then collected for cremation, with the ashes returning to Stalag Luft III. As mentioned, 50 were executed in this way. 20 British prisoners were executed, along with 6 Canadians, 6 Polish prisoners, 3 South Africans, 2 New Zealanders, 2 Norwegians, 1 Argentinian, 1 Belgian, 1 Czech, 1 Frenchman, 1 Greek and 1 Lithuanian. 17 of those captives were then returned to Stalag Luft III, and 2 were sent to Colditz, with 4 being transferred to Sachsenhausen. There were 3 successful escapees, but there was much outrage, especially in Britain, at the executions. A number of former Gestapo agents were convicted of war crimes for their executions, and a number were executed and imprisoned for the shooting of the men. The story of the Great Escape is one today which is still celebrated, and is seen as a daring attempt to subvert the evils of the Nazi regime imposed upon the men housed in the camp. However, the executions of those men who were captured were played out in a different way to how the film depicts. But the story of the Great Escape and those men who were shot is definitely worth remembering. Once again, thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.